international financial management, I have to tell you, this topic is huge. We could easily have an entire course just on this little segment of this one chapter as you go through. It really is a huge aspect because of the fact that there's an awful lot of money shifted and traded out there. Sometimes some people are out there deliberately hiding money to make certain it's not accountable in different systems. We'll talk a little bit about that in this chapter as we go through. Here is a more and more, it's becoming called the triple bottom line accounting. We mentioned this early when we talked about the aspect of green energy and about really looking at three different things. Instead of just looking at the bottom line for financial results, now we're looking at environmental results and accountability, social, environment as you go through, making certain you have certain standards and measurements, as well as financial results. We call it triple bottom line accounting. Keep that in mind. This is burgeoning and is relatively new in concept, except for the fact that if you're going to deal in a worldwide framework, this is becoming much more common and much more popular. It's also becoming very common in the United States as well. People are looking to see, okay, what exactly are you doing for the environment? What exactly are you doing when it comes down to social issues? And they're looking and they're actually measuring these aspects, whether or not they invest in the company or buy its stock as they go through. So this right now, in my mind, tends to be an issue that only really a smaller portion of the population is paying attention to, but this is going to swell in popularity, especially in the next decade as we go through. It certainly needs to be paid attention to in this class because of the fact that you're looking on the international market, and this is becoming a worldwide issue, probably for the betterment of the entire planet. But we're going to have a lot of people out there giving a lip service over here and not doing the thing about it as well. So we'll see what happens with this. The company you're involved with, make certain that you're aware of where they stand in this, because eventually, if you rise to a level of power in the organization and becoming an executive, these will be issues you'll be having to deal with for sure, beginning in the next 10 years, but probably for the next 100 or maybe for the forever of the company as you go through. That being said, the capital structure, really you have to pay attention by where you get your money and how you go about doing it as you go through. And of course, you probably already know this, but I'm going to touch base in the aspect of you certainly can have two ways to raise money. You can always go through the process of borrowing money. You borrow money from a bank. You borrow money by selling bonds as you go through. Those are really the two main ways that you go through and borrow money. Whenever you borrow money, you have to repay the money and repay it at a certain interest rate to whoever you're borrowing it from, whether it's a bank or you sell bonds to bondholders out there. Or you can always sit down and sell stock as you go through. We call that equity because you're really developing owner's equity in the company by selling stock, and you're also having more people buying stock and they become owners of the company. There's two ways to raise money. Okay, you either borrow it, and that's debt through banks or bonds or whatever financial tools that's out there, and you have to pay it back. If you do it through equity, people are buying stock in your company. You don't have to pay that back, except for the fact that you become more accountable to stockholders that are looking over your shoulder to see how the money they put into your company is being properly run, used, and invested to generate a profit, to bring money back to them, either by having it as a growth stock, so the value of the stock rises, or they get dividends in the process as you go through. Sometimes firms use equity by issuing stock in foreign markets, especially if they're opening a brand new area. Let's say, for instance, they move into India. They can move into India, they go into the stock exchange, they sell stock in the Indian stock market. And by the way, that's one of the normal trades for an international company as you go through. It does a couple things. Number one, it really identifies that you are now putting a stake in the land of India, and you're interested in working with them as a whole, as a nation. And you're also saying you're looking for Indians, people in that country, to invest in your country. And that way they'll take pride in the fact that it is now part Indian country, in the Indian company as you go through. That's a big deal. There's a certain amount of pride, and as part of the community interest. So now you become part of the community because your stock is owned by the community as well. So you're making a big mark in the aspect of saying you're seriously interested in the well-being of the country now that you're selling stock in, and it ties you closer to the people themselves as you go through. So that always is the positive thing. You also really, there's a thing called ADRs, American Depository Research. They're foreign shares held by a custodian, usually some type of bank. And as you go out there, this is very common. You hear about ADRs almost as mentioned in conversation if you're in the marketplace out there. You also have offshore financial centers. You know about all the movies we're talking about. Hey, they moved the money to an offshore center so we can't track it. Yes, it's real and it really does exist. We call them offshore because of the fact that they specialize in financing non-residents. They give you low taxes and few banking regulations. It kind of is the wild, wild west of banking as you go out there. There's no rules, no regulations, and yes, there's secret black bags shipped in on private jets, deposited. Yes, those things are real. Yes, they do exist. We call them offshore financial centers. But of course, none of you will ever be involved in that. You may never see that, but really, you probably will never see that as you go through. But they do exist out there as you go through. In other words, there's meccas that are designed just to go through and have secret banking. Switzerland also, we don't call it an offshore banking area, but they certainly practice a lot of secrecy for depositors as they go through and accept money and put it in their banks and don't allow anybody to know what is going on behind the scenes. So that being said, capital structure, here's a whole series of different things for how things do it. When it comes to equity and debt, there is no magic mix as you go through, but you'll see really, like in Italy, it's pretty common to borrow as they go through, and there's very little equity for financing. And you'll see United States, it comes close to 50-50 as you go through. So you'll see different mixes out there. So when you go into a different country, it may be very common, like Italy, to adopt debt and go borrow, and the banks are highly involved with the company. But you come to the United States, it's much more involved in the aspect of selling equity, like the United Kingdom, of selling shares of stock. So a large number of people have interest in the company as you go through. So part of it is cultural, part of it is corporate, depending on how you want to raise your capital in the process. Here's a lot of decisions you have out there. What currency should be raised in? Okay, how should it be structured between equity and debt as you go through? What are sources of capital? Which market can objectives be achieved in at the lowest cost? At the end of the day, whichever one is the best deal for your company that's going to cost you the least amount of headache and effort and actually make you more money in the process, that's what you should be choosing when it comes to raising capital for that, for your company to expand in that specific region as you go through. They're moved, a fronting loan is actually made by intermediary, usually a bank, from a parent company or subsidiary, or transfer pricing for transactions between members of the same business enterprise as you go through. Both these things are how you transfer money back and forth within the company and also across borders as you go through. A lot of firms, they centralize financial operations rather than having them all regionally operated, because you have a lot of confusion because you're crossing borders with money, and the borders have different currencies and different values, and the values can fluctuate on a daily basis, let alone on a monthly or annual basis they go through. So really, centralizing finances makes an awful lot of sense. Otherwise, you have different languages spoken, not in the language itself, but in the currency language of oh, we have a franc over here, we have a pound over here, we have a dollar over here, we have this over here, we have this. So you have different currencies, and you have to translate it all into one thing. You're better off having a financial center. This is probably the most common aspect as you go through the International Finance Center for your company as you go through. The cost of capital is often lower in the global capital market, but host country governments, they may restrict, and they have certain rules to rule out this as an option. You're better off, if you can, really be out in the global capital market and try to find the best rates on the worldwide basis than where you're at, or even your home country as you go through whatever is best, the best deal you can get on the money. Often some governments court foreign investment by offering low interest loans, and that really is a prize thing, because then you're investing in the company, you're investing in the company's investing into that country, and that country is investing back in you. It really lowers your cost of capital when these opportunities exist, and you have local debt financing. Once again, you're tying yourself into the community, and the governments like that because then they can have a certain amount of control, and they also know that you're serious about investing in their country as you go through. 3 things to know about this section over here. Triple bottom line is how you sit down there and you measure your environmental status as a company as you're going through, and you have an annual report on that, the social aspect of it, and the financial. We're so used to the financial, we think it's the only thing, but it no longer is the only thing. And the other 2 aspects with the triple bottom line rather than the single bottom line will become a larger item in the next decade and beyond as you go through. Capital structure, know if you're going to finance your structure with equity or debt as you go through, and think about the aspect of international financial centers, whether you're going to, the centralization of finances, it really is a smart way of doing business as you go through. Take care.